Good afternoon. No, I need to. Yeah. Well, this afternoon we will discuss the One Army Impact Initiative, which started in January officially, and with the aim to answer this important question: how do we measure the impact of our work? The need to improve the description of the impact of our programs was brought to our attention by some of the development offices in the supporting, that is the donor territories, in response to demands from their back donors for more evidence about the results of Army community development projects around the world. We soon realized, however, that almost all territories are struggling with the same issue at this point in time. It's not just for our donors that we need to answer this question. We should all desire to know what kind of change and transformation we are aiming for in our work and whether we are achieving that, whether it's funded by a donor or not. We need evidence as a testimony to the redeeming grace of God and a learning point to guide our future work. I think that the title One Army Impact Initiative is a bit of a problem. It can be misunderstood in all the elements of the title, and in this paper I will show you why this is so. I will highlight the challenges and potentiality of this initiative and hopefully encourage you to help us to make this drive a success. Let's start at the One Army and be honest. On the surface of it, we are not one army, not by a long shot. There are enormous variations in Salvation Army ministry across the territories, across the continents, and across the work sections in any given territory. Our army world is marked by its diversity, as pictures taken around the world quickly reveal. However, we want to be united. And what's more important, we want our work to be holistic in its approach. The whole gospel for the whole person, for the whole world. The need for an integrated mission focus has been recognized since the 1980s, and it is still a matter of a lively internal discussion. General Bond, in her vision statement, has offered us a new way to talk about this. We are one army with one mission and one message, she said. But this is still a vision and not a reality everywhere. A vision that clearly states where we want to be. We may be diverse in our ways of working. We may be more together in our view on our one mission, but we should certainly be united around our one message. My first observation is that we need to have solid theological foundations for our work. Theological reflection, as exercised by practical theologians, is no longer a luxury for our army. It is a necessity. The One Army Impact Initiative will seek to identify an appropriate approach to impact assessment that includes our notion of a holistic ministry, an integral mission, for our faith-based organization, taken across all our activities. This understanding will then have to be applied to the particular circumstances and parameters of all our mission initiatives. The next word in the title is impact. An assessment of past evaluations of projects indicates that this is a weak point in our system. And in my experience in Salvation Army programs in Africa and Europe for more than 30 years, and with my overview of worldwide programs for nearly 3 years now, I conclude that we have tended to focus on what activities we do and what they cost. Sometimes we try to measure the outputs, but we rarely take the time to examine outcomes and impact. In our evaluations, we often have not answered the questions about the bigger picture and the larger context. Too often we say, well, we have done our bit, and it's now out of our hands. We must leave it to the Lord. This is understandable, but not good enough. Is there any way to describe what the Lord is doing? What is the impact, the change, the gospel message affects? What reasons do we have to believe that what we are doing was what was needed to be done? Impact assessment deliberately casts a wider net around our action and tries to make sense of the changes that become visible through our activities. I've always found the following slide to be the most helpful illustration of what impact looks like. But the asking questions about our influence in a wider circle of influence around us immediately raises the questions, how much can we reasonably attribute to our action? Can we make any claims at impact at a macro level? Changes in society are influenced by many other factors, social, economic, and political, that easily become more crucial parameters of change in any given environment. The particular difficulty with impact assessment in relation to social programs is that they operate in complex environments where it is not easy to attribute the impact to the influence of any one particular program. The complexity of society is caused by the interaction of social, economic, and political factors. This difficulty has been recognized by evaluation theorists and is in fact led to a particular type of impact assessment approaches that could be grouped under the heading theory-oriented or theory-based evaluations. When we define our spiritual mission as an integral, holistic mission, the whole gospel for the whole person, for the whole world, we enter even in deeper waters. The spiritual impact of our work is particularly difficult to gauge. Let me give an example. Many Christmas movies feature a Salvation Army band playing in the street at Christmas to underline the need for a charitable spirit in that season. However, we cannot take the credit for any increase across the general population in charitable spirit in the month of December. We may contribute to feelings of goodwill, but we cannot claim all the impact. The question remains, however, is there a way to measure the impact of our core band in our town? Sometimes the impact of our action will only be visible on the long term. This would call for longitudinal evaluations over, let's say, a decade or a generation. This is more the realm of the historian. In project work, we do not have time to wait that long. Baseline studies and reliable indicators of change are very important in this context. The problem is often that we only have a poor description of the wider context before we begin our activity and are unable to draw firm conclusions because we have too limited data. We need more and different kind of data for this work. Central to this issue is a desire not to focus solely on measuring the number of activities or the number of people involved or the amount of money spent on programs. Although these are important data, the focus needs to be on the outcomes of the programs and their long-term impact on people, families, communities, the structure of society. Quoting statistics often invokes a sense of reliability. Measuring numbers creates the impression of objectivity. The cold facts speak for themselves. But statistics have their limitations, and some matters cannot be captured in sheer numbers. It has been noted that the annual statistics report published in the Salvation Army yearbook is unreliable. The variations seen from year to year suggest the issue is more complex than merely an unreliable method of counting. There is a program definition issue, which is not easily solved within such a diverse organization. Steps are being taken, however, I can assure you, to remedy the statistical reports, but measuring the impact still eludes us. There's another element to measuring for people of faith. Counting our strength also has a spiritual implication. There is a story about King David. in 2 Samuel 24, who towards the end of his reign said, "Go number Israel." That was a dubious command. The spirit of vainglory in numbers had taken possession of the people and the king. And there was a tendency to trust in numbers and forget God. That's Morgan who commented that way. So Joab, David's general, objects. Why then does my Lord desire this thing? The motive is clearly very important. If we are acting out of a spirit of vainglory, or if the motive is pride, then it's clearly wrong. Do we need to boast about our strength because the donors want to know exactly what their dollar, pound, or euro is doing? Why do they want to know? Do we need to educate the donor that it is not always the way of the kingdom to measure to the last digit? We need another approach to capture change, more descriptive, of a qualitative nature, expressed in a narrative, taken beyond the anecdotal. We need to get our stories right so that they are representative and indicative of the change that is taking place within our ministries. Measurement and evaluation still carry the stigma of judgment. This is even worse if it is forced upon us, done by an outsider. No one likes very much to be weighed and measured in our actions. The outside evaluator may portray a sense of objectivity, but in his evaluation criteria, he will have to deal with his own biases. Theory-based assessments offer different compelling reasons to assess impact. It is to learn and to steer our actions, and they include the end users of our program. This goes beyond management. As Peter Drucker wrote, management is doing things right. Leadership is doing the right things. I think impact assessment is about learning to do the right things. It is not a management issue, but it is about leadership and strategy. Fundamentally, it is about learning to be better stewards of the resources God has entrusted to us. In the One Army Impact Initiative, we believe measurement is a key characteristic of a learning organization. But learning is a discipline we should all engage in for our own sake, knowing why we are doing things, what we aim for, and how we should improve doing them. Measurement as learning is what our engagement is all about. Then there's the last word, initiative or project. The problem is that it suggests that we are going to do something new again, another new buzzword, another new trend. And that's not what the initiative is about. We do not want to change the direction. We just want to add an element to it which we have found missing up to now. We are, in fact, intentionally mindful of what we have learned as an army over the past decades and want to be building on the foundations of the lessons we have learned in participatory approaches, community counseling, integrated mission, faith-based facilitation. These have all been stepping stones for this next stage. So with these critical reflections in mind, we have designed this initiative with 3 phases. The first stage of our engagements is the formulation of a framework that collects our thoughts on impact assessment in the context of a faith-based mission. Put simply, we want to explore what impact measurement means in the context of an integral Christian ministry, so that people of faith may be able to capture the essence of the impact of their efforts in a language that can be easily understood. We will have to define what we mean by the different terms we are using. We are not the first to explore the subject of evaluation. A large number of approaches and theories are available in the social sciences, but we must additionally take into account the complexity of our integral mission. We will need to distinguish between the theories and the methods and decide which approach would be the most valid for us and how this approach would need to be adapted to make it fit for our purpose. It will be important to state how we think measurement and evaluation relate to our mission purposes theologically. In Lamentations 3:40, God's people are instructed to test and examine their ways, to take a good look at what they are doing and reorder their lives under God. General John Gowans often said, we must continually review what we are doing and why we are doing it in order to remain faithful practitioners in the world. With this biblical mandate and Salvation Army tradition in mind, we are approaching the One Army Impact Initiative. The work we want to do is similar to what has been done for the faith-based facilitation process and the toolbox. The FBF process is based on the work of David Kolb on experiential learning, but has been adapted by practical theologians into the pastoral cycle, and they have introduced the element of theological reflection in the process. And this has been further adapted for our own use in the faith-based facilitation reflection process that we now call FBF. We feel that a similar exercise lies ahead of us in the field of evaluation, to test the theories and methods and adapt them for our own use. Secondly, based on the developed framework, we need to have a simple tool that can be used in the field. We will not be able to reach the impact level if we bypass the outcomes. An outcome-based tool that sights towards a description of impact will be a stepping stone for impact assessments. That's already a considerable step forward. We envisage the actual impact assessment to be a facilitated, collaborative learning process undertaken in partnership with implementers and support offices. This tool will be promoted by IHQ for use across the Army for years to come. We will not have finished after 1 year. The real work starts in December. We're going to start by focusing on two sectors, health and livelihoods, income-generating activities. We're still struggling with the words, but that's what I wrote at that point. Obviously, many more applications of the unified framework are needed, and we hope to find colleagues who will find ways to apply the framework in their sectors and work collaboratively with us in this task. We want to emphasize the learning element of this exercise by bringing together practitioners on the internet. We hope to create virtual communities of practice around the world. Permanent online communities where program implementers and support offices can exchange experiences and ideas. We are making use of the Connections platform that is available under Lotus Notes. The third phase will be a plan to implement these tools in the coming years through seminars and one-on-one in project support. We are still in the first phase of our enterprise now and would like to refer to a fact sheet that I haven't got. But if anyone wants to know more about it, please address us and we will gladly share where we are at the moment. We would like you to take part in the discussions on our Connections Forum. To conclude, let me return to the question, how do we assess the impact of our work? Well, we're working on the answer. In this paper, I have shown the challenges of the task and I hope the need for the One Army Impact Initiative. I'm inviting you to help us to be more faithful as we seek together to understand the impact we are making in Christ's name and with his help. Amen.
Well, thank you very much, Commissioner, for opening out that incredibly important issue. As we recognise, one of the 12 significant questions we're asking at this conference together, this Global Conversations. I'm now going to invite Benjamin Nauta from the India Territory, who I met many years ago, and Benjamin's going to come and share his response to the paper on behalf of us, and then we'll move on. Thank you, Benjamin.
I thank Commissioner for his paper and agree it is very important that we plan in the beginning of the project what kind of deeper changes and transformations that we are aiming to achieve. Most of the time, the priority was given in implementing the activities and looking for outputs without looking for evidence-based and sustainable changes and transformation. External evaluators are not able to identify the real impact because of lack of time and information. The best people to measure the impact of an activity are those who are most closely involved, the people engaged daily in the program. It is also true that on many occasions during the impact assessment, importance was not given to gauge spiritual impact. It is important to measure deeper changes and transformation that has happened in the lives and the livelihood of people. The change and the transformation should be long-term, evidence-based, and sustainable. It is an opportunity for the whole Salvation Army to move from assessing the activities and the outputs to assess the effectiveness of our work. Changes happened, and we need to more accountability based on reliable evidence. Impact measurement also gives an opportunity for effective learning. It can be a complete qualitative and quantitative assessment of the relationship and identify changes in the lives of individuals and communities as a result of a particular intervention. During impact assessment, it is vital to involve different stakeholders in terms of ownership and sustainability. Also, it is important to have an emphasis on the relationship, but many occasions it will be only social, economic, and political. The spiritual impact, transformations, and relationship with God should be assessed, which is difficult to assess, but always setting of indicators based on mission statement could be helpful. Outputs, efforts taken, and intermediate results generated by program. Outcomes, effectiveness of the activity implemented, impact, change, and transformation from the original situation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Now I'm going to invite, please, Lieutenant Colonel James Nauta from the USA Central Territory to present our second paper on this critical question: how do we measure the impact to our work? Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel, and thank you, Commissioner. That was an excellent paper and difficult to follow. My goodness. Well, in proposing the creation of a task force on impact evaluation, the Salvation Army's International Program Resources Department has posed the following questions, which many of you are probably already familiar with, and Commissioner touched on this just a bit. How do we promote best practices in countries where normative influence is weak and we are more or less left to our own devices? Another question is, how do we effectively build the capacity of our staff and officers and employees to be faithful and effective in mission? How do we evaluate and measure the impact of our activities, which is the subject of this session? How do we approach program assessment in a holistic way in the light of our integrated mission? And then lastly, how are we being faithful to our One Army mission focus in this respect? Well, this paper will share examples of current evaluation and impact measurement methods for possible application in a wide variety of Salvation Army settings. It's important, I think, to begin with just a reminder of the Army's historic ministry and integrated ministry that was founded by William and Catherine Booth. William Booth founded the Salvation Army in 1865, of course we all know, to evangelize and help the unchurched poor. It is a well-documented fact that the founder quickly realized that people preoccupied with survival needs for food and shelter were unable to focus on eternal matters, and he understood the necessity of meeting their temporal as well as spiritual needs. The founder's son and second general of the Salvation Army, Bramwell Booth, perhaps summarized our integrated mission and approach best by saying, and I love this quote, "It is incumbent upon the Army to imitate its master and go about doing good to the bodies as well as the souls of men, and to do so in an effective and therefore systematic way." Well, over the years, we all know this has been the hallmark of Salvation Army holistic ministry. Building on this solid foundation, the Army has maintained a spirit of humility and has recognized that any positive impact of our ministry is the result of God's work and not our organizational efforts. recently, a few years ago, when a public relations firm introduced doing the most good emphasis in the USA, many thought this to be a boastful departure from the Army's more humble roots. This humble approach to serving exemplifies the spirit of Christ as expressed in that familiar passage of Scripture that the National Commander quoted last night from Matthew 25. And it says to us again, and it upholds the most important fact that the final verdict of the impact of our ministry will come from our Lord. Now, donor accountability. The Salvation Army has a long history of effective stewardship in delivering Christian programs and services. For over a century, the Salvation Army has been recognized as one of the most respected organizations in the world. Over the years, we've adopted professional practices and strong internal financial audit systems, resulting in solid public trust. Indeed, we have been pretty successful in developing effective programs and sharing countless stories of transformation as a result of our programming and community work. As we'll touch on a little later, it hasn't been a systematic and formalized approach, unfortunately, to collecting those stories. So too, the Army has been reasonably effective in quantifying our activities through well-developed statistical reporting procedures. But we have not been very good at measuring the impact of our ministry, except in areas where funders have specifically required more sophisticated evaluation. More often than not, we have had a tendency to emphasize activities and outputs rather than outcomes. Yet, as the International Program Resources Department has rightly noted, measuring the impact of specific outcomes of our programs and services is increasingly demanded by external donors and regulatory authorities. And in response to these requirements, the International Program Resources Consultancy Group has concluded that there is a need for a unified approach to measuring ministry impact, and efforts are underway to identify common tools and processes for impact measurement. And Commissioner referred to those in his paper. Measuring the impact while maintaining mission alignment. That's so important, folks. The Salvation Army's Vision for Caring Planning Guide, which you may not be aware of, was approved by the Commissioners' Conference in 1998, and it emphasized that quality services must be mission-based, comply with high standards, utilize competent and committed personnel, and provide for integrated ministry. This vision guide identifies some guiding principles, which I think provide us with a good and useful framework for establishing a solid foundation to help measure the impact of the Army's ministry while maintaining mission alignment. And in setting forth these guidelines, the Commissioners' Conference said that the best programs must include planned program development, community involvement, finances sufficient to provide services, physical facilities and equipment appropriate for the program, personnel qualified to perform tasks, records and report program services and aid in management decisions, and periodic evaluation for quality control, as well as an informed public to provide future funding. Some good and helpful guidance from the USA Commissioners' Conference. Now, again, let me just share here this afternoon some examples of current evaluation and measurement approaches, which may have some currency within the broader Salvation Army. First of all, program evaluation. Over the years, the Salvation Army has successfully utilized a program review process, usually where representatives of the supervising headquarters have used a variety of approaches, most often quantitative analysis, to assess programs and services. Early in 2000, the Army in the USA developed national standards for social services and more recently, national standards for the new Ray and Joan Kroc Core Community Centers have been approved, against which programs are evaluated. Accompanying these standards is a self-study tool designed for use of staff in assessing compliance and building capacity for quality programs. Evaluations have sought to ensure required levels of performance within sound operating conditions, provide accountability to the Salvation Army mission, the expectations of founders, ourselves, and those we serve, promote effective program services in a safe, clean, healthy, comfortable, supportive, and nurturing environment, identify high-risk critical issues that may represent a potential liability for the Army, and help improve the linkage and connectivity and teamwork with headquarters. Now, an important point, folks. While not measuring ministry impact per se, the supposition is that maximum impact will result from quality programs and services. A rather new approach to measuring the impact of our services would be walkthroughs. Walkthroughs provide a structured learning process to assist program leadership and staff in strengthening the ongoing work and culture of a program and are never stand-alone events to showcase or evaluate the work of staff. To be effective, this process needs to be part of a regular routine of a program, not a special event. The feedback is for program improvement, not for evaluation of individual staff or the program as a whole. This approach is intended to result in concrete feedback to staff coupled with reflection, discussion, and commitment to specific actions that will enhance and sustain the richness of the program. The process may be completed by program leaders, staff, and volunteers, or could be expanded to others who are affiliated with the programs. Programs using walkthrough learning processes believe that an active self-study approach to professional growth and program improvement will produce results that are sustained over time. Walkthroughs provide an ongoing means of engaging program staff in dialogue and reflection on their own practices and the program goals as a whole. The learning is grounded in real experience of program leaders and can assist in aligning performance within an activity area as well as across a variety of activities. It provides a specific reason for the program leaders to be viewing activities and encourages their role as a coach and support to help staff improve performance. The process creates a mutual ground for discussing program activities and practice. And with walkthroughs, like program evaluations, impact is inferred as a result of quality programs and services. Outcome evaluations. Funders are increasingly requiring outcome evaluations as an evidence-based method in measuring the impact of program services. Outcome evaluation measures how program participants have benefited or changed through participating in program services. This evaluation measurement approach includes ongoing monitoring as well as a more formal review and analysis of results of program participation. It includes feedback on program services from members and participants on a regular basis. Changes to be measured may include knowledge, skills, attitudes, behaviors, motivation, decisions, and conditions. Outcome evaluation assesses the extent to which a program service is successful in achieving its desired essential goals, objectives, and desired outcomes. Effective evaluation typically uses a logic model, which many of you are familiar with, that clearly identifies program inputs, activities, outputs, outcomes, and indicators. A recent example of the use of outcome evaluations as a method of measuring the impact of program services is in the development of a Fit Kids project for the new Ray and Joan Kroc Core Community Centers in the USA. The Kroc Fit Kids project is a comprehensive endeavor which approaches health and wellness from a holistic perspective using the programs and services provided by Kroc centers. In order for a person to live a vital and healthy life, they must be healthy or fit in spirit, mind, and body. The Salvation Army has long been committed to this philosophy, and it's the same philosophy that's highlighted by the World Health Organization, which defines health as, quote, a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity, end quote. The Kroc Fit Kids project, while addressing a specific focus, will nevertheless include comprehensive programming that helps build up participants in each of these critical areas. This project, again, uses the logic model, and in the paper's appendices, you'll be able to take a look at that logic model. I'm sure most of you are familiar with it. And then there's surveys. Another evidence-based method of measuring the impact of program services includes surveying of participants, family members, community constituents, and staff. In 2010, the Salvation Army in the USA launched a National Youth Asset Development Initiative, we call it YADI, in partnership with the Search Institute, authors of the 40 developmental assets, which are cited as necessary building blocks for healthy development of young people. The Youth Asset Development Initiative, beginning in Kroc centers throughout the country, embodies Joan Kroc's emphasis on tapping youth's potential by providing opportunities for them to nurture the gifts which God has given to them for the betterment of others as well as themselves. The Army is keenly aware of the magnitude of Joan Kroc's gift and the responsibility for wise use of this gift for Kroc centers. An important component of the YADI endeavor includes the use of a survey known as the Developmental Assets and Life Experience Profile, specifically designed for the Salvation Army. And this is identified again at the appendices. You'll be able to take a look at all of the elements that are involved in how these were developed by Search Institute in partnership with the Salvation Army. And includes 5 major goals, by the way, that we had as outcomes. One would be that we see school success. We see hopeful purpose in kids as a result of participating in programs with the Youth Asset Development Initiative. We see positive emotions and involvement in civic activities and citizenship, and then avoiding violence is so important. So those were some of the outcomes that national leadership decided should be part of this Youth Asset Development Initiative. Also, with this, staff and adult feedback questionnaires have been developed by Search Institute and used in this initiative. This very significant evidence-based project, beginning in Kroc centers, is being recognized as an important resource in documenting positive outcomes and services to youth and families throughout the Salvation Army. And we see it growing and growing and extending beyond Kroc centers. It's an exciting venture, and I'd be happy to talk more about that with some of you as you have questions. The initiative is now in its 3rd phase. It's viewed as an early step of accountability for programming focused on positive youth development as an outcome for all programs, rather than just and merely delivering quality programs. It's a neat effort, you guys. Economic impact studies, another example of how we might measure the impact of our services. In measuring the impact of our program services, consideration might be given to an economic impact study. And yet another example stemming from the new Ray and Joan Kroc Core Community Centers in the USA. It's given us a lot of opportunities. It has. We have really explored the use of these economic impact surveys or studies. And we've actually launched this with a national impact study. We're working with a group that is called Partners for Sacred Places. It's a nonprofit organization dedicated to sound stewardship and active community use of sacred places across the USA. Backed by the reputation of this group and the University of Pennsylvania School of Social Administration, the proposed, or the study will provide the Salvation Army with hard data, quantitative proof of the value and impact of Kroc centers. The study report will also outline strategies for weaving this data into a compelling case statement for Kroc centers, one that balances statistics with stories of the lives they represent. Additionally, the report will include analysis and recommendations for how Kroc centers can increase their value and return on investment by leveraging existing resources in a new way. Working closely with the Kroc Center in Philadelphia, partners did their preliminary workup and designed a template that'll be used now across America. But they customized a methodology to ensure that the study fully captures the broad spectrum and unique combination of services provided at and through Kroc centers. In contrast, here's an important point, in contrast to other existing economic valuation methodologies, Partners' methodology addresses both of the core functions of a Kroc center: community center and congregation. That ought to get an amen from you guys. The study analysis includes the following: direct spending, and they have a bunch of variables that they use to assess the economic impact in direct spending in schools and daycares and open spaces, green spaces. The magnet effect, they have another way of defining that. Individual impact, and then lastly, invisible safety net. And would you believe, in Philadelphia at the Kroc Center, 30 million plus was the economic impact. Now this is evidence-based. This is not their conjecture. This is evidence-based. $30 million in economic impact, the Salvation Army's Kroc Center in one town. And we hope to see this report eventually for the entire 27, I think there will be Kroc centers. Well, concluding, building capacity for mission effectiveness. We've tried in this paper to contribute in some small way to a clearer view of evaluation and impact measurement. Perhaps the examples of current approaches measuring impact which have been shared will result in further development of useful evaluation tools to help the Army assess its mission effectiveness. Each of the foregoing examples of current evaluation measurement approaches include an emphasis on self-regulation or assessment designed to build capacity. And I know, Commissioner, you like that thought. Building capacity, self-evaluation among staff to target specific improvement goals and concrete action steps. Of course, self-regulation and assessment is critically important because, as noted by authors here quoted in the paper, Wilson and Pearson, we may be the most important source of information about our own performance. No one knows the work, the thought behind it, the personal goals better than ourselves. Each evaluation measurement approach also includes assessment in a holistic manner consistent with the Army's integrated message and mission. And lastly, to further encourage building capacity for mission effectiveness, I think the development of learning hubs designed to test, store, and share knowledge of new innovations in evaluation measurement approaches seems to be a promising activity and should be pursued by the Salvation Army. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Colonel. That was a tremendous paper, and it's really interesting, really salutary to see how much the presenters' papers actually complement each other. And I think you'll be very encouraged to take the chance to speak to both Colonel and Commissioner after this session to understand something more of this important area of our measurement. I'm going to invite, please, now for Major Angelina Kapire from the Zimbabwe Territory to speak on our behalf in response to the paper from Colonel Nauta. Thank you.
I want to thank Colonel Nauta for his paper. I understand impact to be the strong, powerful, or dramatic effect that something or someone has on the other. So what is the Salvation Army's historic approach been to measuring impact? It is true that doing good to the body as well as the soul had a powerful and strong effect on people during the ministry of William, Catherine, and Bramwell Booth. For many years, the Salvation Army, imitating our Master Jesus Christ, through its holistic approach, brought a strong and powerful effect on people. Jesus Christ demonstrated that for an individual to be able to focus on eternal matters, basic survival needs are to be taken care of first. And we read it in the Bible in Matthew chapter 6, verse 30 to verse 44. Abraham Maslow, a psychologist, in his hierarchy of needs, also highlighted that basic needs have to be satisfied first before moving to higher needs. The positive impact of our ministry is a result of God's work, not our organizational effort. It is true that our God is a God of miracles. Can the impact of our ministry be felt without the effort of the organization? I feel there is need for the organization to work hard, put more effort in its ministry, so that there is a positive impact. Therefore, this positive impact is both God's effort and also organizational effort. God will take away what he has given us if we don't work hard. As we read from the Bible, Matthew chapter 25, verse 14 to verse 30, it was talking about the talents. Donor accountability. Being good stewards of Christian programs has made the Salvation Army to be respected, trusted, and recognized. This is a positive impact, and as an army, we should continue to build this trust. In most donor-funded programs and activities, impact of our work is measured as required or requested by the donor. Measuring the impact of our work is more than just numbers, quantitative measure. The evidence of what we see when we look back, seeing the beneficiaries of our services, their smiles, the stories they tell, all this will help us to see and measure the impact of our work. Qualitative information is very effective when measuring the impact of our ministry. We always say this slogan, where there is need, there is the Salvation Army. Measuring impact while maintaining mission alignment. Different ways of measuring impact have been used and have been highlighted by Colonel Nauta. As one army with one mission, I would want to think there is need to have a unified approach of measuring impact of our work, which is mission-focused. Different programs may have different approaches of measuring the impact, but the important thing is to remain mission-focused. I thank you.
Well, thank you, friends. Now I'm going to invite you and your groups to work as we did this morning, facilitate and record on each group. Just to recognise we've got about 40 minutes, so 10 minutes on each question. Certainly let's move in to make sure you answer question 2 and 3 are critically important questions for the response back on Friday. So can I invite you now to take that task? Thank you.